all know someone who suffers from cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, or chronic respiratory illness. These are commonly referred to as non-communicable diseases or NCDs. But are we aware that these illnesses contribute to more than 70% of the deaths in the Caribbean? In addition, they burden our healthcare systems, reduce economic growth, cut our productivity, and affect our families and communities. NCDs in the Caribbean are now an epidemic that require a coordinated effort from governments, healthcare providers, communities, and for all of us to resolve. Professor Emeritus Carl Theodore, Senior Consultant Advisor to the HEU Center for Health Economics in Trinidad, Dr. Kenneth Connell, Vice President of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, and Professor Simon Anderson, Director of the George Allen Chronic Disease Research Center of the Caribbean Institute for Health Research. They will discuss the NCD epidemic, its challenges, and how our lifestyle choices are impairing our well-being and pushing up government expenditure on health across the region. I am Tony Thorne, on behalf of our host, the Central Bank of Barbados, welcoming all to this Caribbean Economic Forum, entitled Managing the Cost and Economic Fallout from Non-Communicable Diseases in the Caribbean. This will be our focus tonight as we assess and examine the growing incidence of non-communicable diseases within our region. What are the social and economic costs? Will we be able to reach the 2025 WHO target for tackling diseases? And what happens if we fail to meet these targets? Tune in tonight. I am happy to be your host, Tony Thorne, for this edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum. Welcome.
Good night once again. As I said before, my name is Tony Thorne, and this is the latest edition of the Central Bank of Barbados's Caribbean Economic Forum. The Caribbean Economic Forum is one of the educational initiatives by the Central Bank of Barbados with the aim to empower and educate our Caribbean citizens on a range of topics, from financial inclusion to tonight's topic, which is impactful, timely, and affects us all, NCDs. Good night once again to my panelists, Dr. Connell, Professor Theodore, and Professor Anderson. Wonderful to have you here. We do not have a lot of time, and I know this discussion is going to be very exciting. So I'm going to dive right in. Our team conducted a study and a survey, and our first question that we asked the respondents was, individuals like me can help control the spread of non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes. 46% strongly agree, 42% agree, 8% disagreed, and 4% strongly disagree. Now, Professor Anderson and Dr. Connell, more than 80%, and I know you like numbers, so let's say 88% of the respondents identified that they agreed with this statement. But NCDs continue to be a burden socially, economically, and health-wise. So given that, in this era, what constitutes a healthy lifestyle for the average Caribbean citizen? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's explore that for a minute. I think the first thing that we need to let people understand is that good health is not just an absence of disease or illness, but it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. So the components of a healthy lifestyle means that an individual should consider eating a balanced diet, getting in good amount of movement or exercise. I prefer movement than exercise, avoiding things like tobacco and alcohol, and getting plenty of rest. And, our bodies are designed to require a balance of proteins, a balance of carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, etc., and water, not sugary sweetened beverages, to stay in good working on condition. So our Caribbean people need to understand also that um, the different age groups will have a different balance required. So when you're young, 15, 16, your energy requirements are going to be slightly different than if you're in your 80s. You're not going to take the same amount. And of course, the amount of movement, activity, and sleep, etc., that you might want to do will also change. And are also related to a good healthy lifestyle is good mental well-being, and part of that requires you to connect with people, to be physically active, to try and learn some new skills, and sharing has also been seen to be an area that sort of kindness is really affiliated with good mental health. And of course, they use this new term these days, which is called mindfulness, but it's really about paying attention to what's going on, and so on. So these are some of the components that might help our Caribbean people to look at where they are and look at where they could be. And it's a lifestyle that is across the ages. It's not something that you can only do in your 20s. You have to maintain this balance across your lifespan. And so I think that Dr. Connell might come in with some more points, but I think that's a starting point for the region.
Thank you so much, Dr. Connell.
Sure, I completely agree with what Simon just said. So, Tony, your poll is not surprising at all. No one actually gets up on mornings and says, I want to be unhealthy. We all want to do the right thing. We all want to get that physical activity in. We want to avoid those activities that are unhealthy. And we all want to live a healthy life, but we want to do it the easy way. The problem with living a healthy lifestyle is that it's not always all on us. A lot of it depends on the environment that we're in. It's almost like being in a freezer and saying, I want to be warm. It's more challenging if you live in an unhealthy environment. And so this construct, and I want to be very clear on this construct on the determinants of healthy lifestyle has come about in the public health space. And these are all the other factors, some that Simon has already mentioned, but some of the other factors that we don't even think about that are having an impact on our health, or health literacy, for instance, or spirituality, the economic predictors of health, the political determinants of health, and of course, quite topical now as well, and I'll come to this later in the program, the commercial determinants of health. So one is more likely to be healthy if one lives in a healthy environment. And I'm just going to close here by saying that in my opening shots, if it was easy for me to ride to work every morning in a nice designated cycle lane and not having to avoid another public health emergency on the road, if it was easy for me to arrive at work and have a healthy breakfast and get on with life, if it was even easier for me to take time off during my workday for reflection and to pay attention or more attention to my mental health, then I am more likely to do it than if those things are challenging.
Good point. Thank you so much.
Tony, could I ask the two docs a question? Because as I'm listening, I know I am old enough to know that 40, 50 years ago, we never had these kind of problems in the region, not to the extent. And it means then that what must have happened, that something happened that caused us, because we say it is it's eating is our culture, being our movement thing is partly our culture. Our question is, what it has happened to us over the last, 20, 30 years, that something changed in the way as Caribbean people we are living, in the way we have chosen to live differently. And I keep asking myself, why? What brought this about? Now, some people say, well, it's because of our proximity to the US made a big difference and things like. I don't know if it's as simple as that. And I think it is one of the things that we have to we have to cogitate more on try to find out why our culture change went in that direction. That's what I want. Why it went in that direction.
And I think the response to that is not difficult. The behavioral change occurred because life happened, modernity happened. We wanted to get to work without having to walk from St. Lucie to St. Michael. We wanted to get to work, without having to sweat. We wanted to have meals that were fast, like just driving up to a drive-through window and ordering a meal, collecting it, paying some money, and getting instant satisfaction. We wanted to go out and have fun and consume larger quantities of alcohol and all those kinds of things. So life changes, and modernity brings with it several positive things. We have been exposed to air travel. We can travel to various places around the world and consume various cultures. And by consuming these cultures, we bring back both the good parts of them and the bad parts of them. And inherently, in our Caribbean society, and we are not immune to these things, life must change and behavior will change. Our challenge is, how do we reconstruct our environment such that we allow for modern changes in our society, but still regulate unhealthy practices?
And speaking of that,
Yeah.
I want to go to childhood obesity, which is a real thing. And I wanted you to, particularly you, Dr. Connell, best in class examples of how the region has fought against childhood obesity.
So there are three things we have to agree on this program before we can proceed. One is that this is a major threat. The NCDs are a major threat to our existence. It's not just an evening conversation with three panelists and a very cool moderator. It's a really serious threat to our existence. The second thing is the threat is increasing. In other words, projections are that we will be at an even higher danger in the next decade or even 2 decades from now. So the future does not look bright. And the only way we can address the future is by addressing those citizens of the future, or children, or in childhood. The third point that we have to agree on is that we as a society in the Caribbean, with juggling many economies of, especially economies of scale, and many costs, including climate change and having to pay for everything from a pandemic to the various things that happen from time to time, like a hurricane season, for instance. On top of all of that, we have the cost of funding the management of NCDs. So it means the only thing we can do is try to prevent them. Prevention is really the only solution for a small island developing state. And if there's nothing else that we agree on this program, we have to agree that the only way forward for us to sustain the cost of NCDs is to reduce it. Now, childhood obesity is one such intervention. And I will use my own country as an example, the Barbados Childhood Obesity Prevention Campaign, in collaboration with the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados. Massive campaign, a very long campaign. You've all seen the ads targeting sugar sweetened beverages and marketing of sales and stuff like that to kids. We've seen in our country the implementation of a school nutrition program to address that. We've also seen the increase in the infrastructure for physical activity within schools. And there are many out there that would say, well, these kids are at school, let them just have their fun and let them just eat as they wish. But what we are not recognizing, and I want to leave on this point, we are at risk of becoming the first generation to hand over the baton to a future generation with a shorter life expectancy. And if that does not scare us as a parent or a guardian or a citizen in this space, then nothing is likely to do so.
Yeah.
Is definitely scared me, and I'm going to go to Dr. Theodore at this point in time. Some governments have actually taxed high sugared products and limited advertising of quote unquote unhealthy foods, especially with our vulnerable health budgets. Do you think this would work in the Caribbean? Taxing high sugared products and limiting advertising on particular foods?
Well, I do think the issue is whether it really will work, because there is evidence that it really has been working.
Mhm.
The major example we have in the region right now is the fact that in um, in in Barbados in 2015 there was a tax imposed on sugar sweetened drinks. The tax was 10%, and within a year, by the time it was checked, what we saw a decline in the consumption of sugar sweetened. It was not a dramatic decline; it was a little more than 4%. But the fact is, it went in the right direction. And what is signaled to the government is that if you want a bigger decline, maybe what you have to try is a higher level of taxation. And in fact, the government has doubled the tax from 10% to 20% now. So our expectation is that the decline in the sugar sweetening is going to be much more significant than it has been. So I don't think it's a question of if, it's a question of how much. And I think what our governments have to do is to try to arrive at that level of taxation which gives them the level of decline in consumption that they really want to see. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I would
Thank
absolutely agree with that. And Tony, what I would say to what Prof. Theodore has just added, it's not even just the taxation, but I think that Caribbean citizens are also entitled to know, well, what are you doing with this money that you're taxing us? After you've collected all these taxes, is the money being spent to change the health environment? I just filled my truck with diesel. I would feel a lot better knowing if the tax on that diesel was used to repair roads. So the same way I have that feeling, I don't mind being taxed if I can see what it is being used for. The same question could be asked with health. The funds collected from taxation, from the sugar sweetened beverages, or all the various health levies throughout the region, I'm not singling out one particular country, are they then being used to improve the health environment? Are they then being used to support civil society organizations and advocacy about health? Are they then being used to change the infrastructure so that cheaper foods can become available? In other words, how is taxation not just changing behavior, but changing the environment?
Environment.
Stick a pin in that. I have a
Okay.
follow-up question for you, but before I do that, I have a question that I need to ask Professor Anderson. The goal, according to PAHO, is to avoid 5,000 of NCD deaths per year by 2030 and to reduce the upward cost spiral. The WHO has a 2025 target to fight NCDs. This is even sooner than the PAHO's 2030. In 2023, where do these goals stand? And are these timelines realistic within a Caribbean context? I don't want to put you in trouble with the international health organizations, but this is a real question.
Well, this is a real question, and it's an important question because actually there is a system to measure where we are with respect to these goals. We must remember that the problem with NCDs was actually spotted by Caribbean nations. In 2008, the Port of Spain Declaration suggested that NCDs was a significant problem, and that led to a high-level meeting related to the WHO in 2011 and the development of these Millennium Goals and now Sustainable Development Goals. And actually, if we are going to actually know where we are, we have to measure things. And countries need to be committed to measure these things over a 5-year period. So what we find is that the accrual of data and the assessment of that is limited. So we are able to say where we were probably 10 years ago, but it's very difficult to say we are today. So for example, Barbados did a massive survey in 2011, 2012 called the Health of the Nation Study, but this is 10 years ago. Now we can't use 10 years old data to say, okay, we have changed our status by this percentage because of so on. And actually, the monitoring documentation asks countries to have targets, to have to be able to collect data on mortality, and Barbados does do that. And if you look across the Caribbean, there's a lot of countries that have the targets set, have a mortality collection of information in place, have surveys that are done to some extent, but very old, not very much. And of course, our countries don't support research in that sense. It will support studies and surveillance, but not necessarily reports, surveys, studies that are research oriented, and things like smoke-free environment, things including alcohol-free environment, media campaigns, etc. Some countries are able to do this, and this is the metric that we sort of go across to say, okay, what percentage of countries? And very few countries are hitting it out of the park in terms of getting to that state where we can say, yes, we are going to meet those targets. Can the targets be met, particularly with NCDs? I think that it may be a little bit too late in the day to say in 5 years' time, but certainly for 2030, if we put the monitoring and evaluation strategies in place and support it, the government has to put more money into health, not less. It has to look across the whole gambit of problems, not just thinking about heart attacks, strokes, etc., but obesity-related things, getting people to get their blood pressure to target, for example, getting people to know what's going on with their sugars. Know your numbers is what is often said. So we're not quite there yet, but in order for us to take that step, we have to implement things. We have to implement things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to add one point. Doctor, following what Simon said, if we could go back to what Dr. Connell said, you see, it's Simon said we need more money, and that there is some truth in that. But I think what Dr. Connell said is not just a question of more money, is what we use the money for and how we use it. And I think that a lot more emphasis has to be put there. A lot more emphasis has to be put there. Yeah.
And on that note,
so
to my next question to you, Dr. Connell, the political and commercial considerations for health within the region. Do you have an opinion or any wider context on that?
Do you have a long enough show? So I started the program by saying there is a problem. Remember, I said there's a problem, and it is a major threat in our region, the NCDs. Firstly. Secondly, the threat is increasing. It's not a plateau, it's actually the trajectory is increasing. And thirdly, and this is a solid point, the only solution for small island developing country is prevention, because we cannot afford treatment. We have to get into prevention. Now, one such thing in terms of prevention is the healthy lifestyle that Simon described. But I started by saying there's so many determinants outside of health that impact this lifestyle. One such determinant are the commercial determinants. Our Caribbean governments cannot afford this all on their own. The private sector has a role, industry has a role. They produce the products that we consume. Now, here's the question that we all have to ask ourselves. You have industry that produces, for instance, private sector that can have a positive impact on health. They can do things like reformulation of unhealthy products. They can assist in various health programs. They can assist in supporting civil society organizations. And so they can help the health environment, that I was just describing, and make the environment healthier. Or they can have an opposite effect when you think about it. They can continue not doing anything, and all of the products that are produced by them, for instance, could be hazardous to our health. And then we have a whole conflict between profit over people. Now, this is a delicate balance because the commercial determinants also determine our life in general. Our families have to work. They have to work in these companies. They have to earn a living. The balance is, how do you remove the conflict of interest that is currently present in the private sector and in these commercial determinants of health, such that they do not unduly influence decisions on health? And let me explain what I mean by that. Companies need to have a voice. They need to be able to declare, well, let's just use sugar sweetened beverages. We will reformulate our products, or we will make efforts to do X, Y, and Z. In other words, to come more in line to have a healthier or more sustainable health environment. But that company cannot set the policy. The policy has to be set by health, such that the conflict of interest that is inherently there, because it's a company, it's built for profit, does not unduly influence the final decision that is made. And we have in our Caribbean landscape several examples of this. Some would say front of package warning labels. Others might look at sugar sweetened beverages, but really everything, these industries have money and therefore they can impact. And we have to decide, how do we remove them from making the final decision? I will use the analogy of a courtroom. We expect that industry should have a voice and be able to give a defense in court, but industry cannot or should not sit on the jury making the final decision. That decision has to be unbiased and has to be made in the best interest of health.
Thank you.
Can I jump onto something? Prof, before you jump on, Prof, because it's really important to. I mean, we're talking about one of the critical things that we need to have in order to access our best health. As I say, you're going to be my best me. You need to know what it costs, and we really don't know what it costs. We don't measure things in an appropriate way to tell us that, okay, the amount that we spent on health this year was adequate. It is I spoke to Professor Moore this morning. It's an economist, and he was telling me that 30% of the budget is based on health, and that's a significant amount, and a significant proportion of that was being the cost for paying for dialysis care, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the primary prevention side of things is essential. All of these determinant things are important, but we must measure what it costs. We need to know, when I step into the A&E, when I step onto a ward, it costs this amount. It cannot just be, let's just throw this amount to the service this year and we throw the 10% more or 5% more. You need to measure what it costs. And then when we measure what it costs, we'll know if we are spending too little and how much we need to adjust. Thanks.
Well, at this point in time, we have to take a break. But when we, Professor Theodora, I do want to ask you about, as he said, costs, the economic follow and the costs associated with this. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Do not touch that remote control. This is the Caribbean Economic Forum. We'll be right back.
CEF is for me and you. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum move. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum. Log on, tune in, and join the conversations and engage with the experts. Help to find common solutions for common problems during this COVID situation. We fighting to protect our livelihood across the nation. This is for we to learn, share ideas and concerns, to live life like we deserve. We must change we mindset first. Build strong economies, closer societies. We all have a duty. CEF is for me and you. Beyond COVID, CEF is for me and you. Caribbean Economic Forum.
Motorists, when driving on the road, here are some simple reminders. Look out for and extend courtesy to all road users. Give plenty of room to pedestrians, especially in wet weather. Drive slowly. No bother wet them up. Slow down when approaching a pedestrian crossing or school, and always be prepared to stop. Remember, a school zone is a 30-kilometer zone. Cut your speed. Drivers of large and slow-moving vehicles should always keep in the far left hand of a dual carriageway. Keep it simple. Drive left and pass right. These are just simple reminders of your road duties. Drive safely.
Crime is Jamaica's #1 threat. As we stay apart while working together to fight COVID-19, we must all live good and unite against crime and violence in Jamaica. Live good means talk it out, don't fight it out. We must live good to build a safe Jamaica. Stay home, stay safe, live good.
Over 100 murders in 1 month, Jamaica? We can't continue like this. The killing must end. Do right by the future generation. Get the guns, save our country.
Every Jamaican has the right to know what is happening in Parliament, to know when new laws are being passed, and to give their opinions on legislation before either house.
Every Jamaican has the right to see their representatives in action, making laws, holding the executive to account, representing the people, working for the benefit of all Jamaicans.
It is your right to observe first-hand meetings of the Senate, meetings of the House of Representatives, and the meetings of parliamentary committees. You may also take a tour of your parliament.
To find out more about the Houses of Parliament, please call 876-922-0200, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, or visit our website at www.japarliament.gov.jm.
All children deserve positive parenting. Why not pamper us? Be patient with us. Make time to teach us and, of course, play with us. Celebrate milestones with us and don't forget to be our #1 supporter. Do all these things and practice positive parenting today.
Something is happening for someone in this country every single day as a result of the actions of this government.
Professor Theodore, Professor Anderson. Now, let's go right back into the conversation. And my question is for Professor Theodore. We've spoken about the fact that NCDs are a cause of death. We know that they also cause disabilities. What are the real costs of this phenomenon? You know, who's paying the bill? Insurance.
Let me deal with the cost first, because this is one area where I am happy to say, and this is one area where the region we have quite a lot of data on this this particular topic. Now, in many things we have a lot of data from countries abroad, but not so much for the region. But this is one area where there's a lot of information on what the cost of the NCDs, and some of these studies go back to the 1980s. Some of the studies go back to the 1980s. And in fact, if I could sum it up in looking at all the studies, I would say that the minimum figure we're seeing in all these studies for what the NCDs are costing our economies is 5% of our GDP per year. Now, 5% of our GDP. Now, what is interesting about this is that not a single one of the studies I'm talking about, and I'm saying there are many of them, not a single one has looked at the full range of the NCDs. Each of the studies when you looked at, they looked at cardiovascular disease and hypertension or diabetes and something else. They looked at two or three of the NCDs and they came up with these figures. We have seen some studies take the figure to 12% of the GDP. Now, what I'm saying is that if you only look at a small set and you get a a 5% figure. If you look at the full range of the NCDs and you include in that mental health, the figure we're talking about for this region, and everybody in this region has to understand that the figure we're talking about, the cost of it is costing us more than 10% of our GDP every single year, more than 10% of our GDP. Now, if people want to understand what 10% of the GDP is, or the money we spend on health in our countries, the average is 6% and below of our that's what we really spend on. So we're spending 6% on health, and we're letting these NCDs rob us as nations of more than 10%. Now that is, but you know that is one side of the story. The next side of the story, it's not that the NCDs simply are reducing our ability to grow and so on. But what they're doing, they are actually weakening our economic capacity. Let me explain what I mean by that. Our capacity to grow really, and is rest on our economy as such, rests on two pillars. There is our labor force and our capital. That's the savings that we generate in order so that we could to carry on our investment. So labor and capital. What the NCDs do, they are damaging each of these pillars. The NCD is causing problems with our labor force because of the morbidity and the high mortality levels. And they are damaging our capital pillar, because with the expenditures we have to do in the NCDs, we have less funds to invest in things that make our economies more productive. So that it's not simply that we are it is shrinking us, but it is really weakening us, and that is why I think every citizen in this region has to start to take this thing much more. It is not just a question of health. The NCDs are destroying us as nations. They are destroying us as nations, and that is what we have to make the point. That's the point I want to make.
Excellent contribution. I'm going to go to one of our interveners. She's based in Jamaica. Her name is Rosanna Hike, and she is the Health Education Officer at Global Health Advocacy Project, the Health Foundation of Jamaica. Welcome, Rosanna. The floor is yours.
Hi. Thank you for that introduction, Tony. So my question is directed to Professor Theodore, because I love how he raised the point of, the cost of NCDs on economic productivity. And I see he's a man about facts and figures. But I want to ask Professor, do you think the economic aspects of food security in terms of the affordability and availability of healthy foods are prioritized enough by the Caribbean region, especially in mitigating the impacts of poor nutrition on health and economic productivity? Are we really doing enough?
No, the simple answer to the question is really no. We're not doing enough. But I think the more interesting question is why. Why are we not doing? Because I think all of us know, that we really should be doing something. And here's why I go back to a point that incorporate them and having them to work with us and so on. And it's always never a good thing to simply in this thing not to paint the private sector as the sort of evil ones and so on. That is true. But I think we also have to admit that the private sector has been very, very active in ensuring that we don't reach the point where we are really biased towards producing healthy things. I think there has been a lot of resistance, and the reason is simple. The reason is because they are making a lot of money from what they are doing, how they are doing it. And that's why we keep saying the point is reached where it is for our governments to look at it and say no, enough is enough. We are going to begin to legislate certain things based on the information and evidence we have, we are going to pass in the legislature to ensure that you are not going to be able to produce certain kinds of things for our people anymore, or we're not going to import those things. And I think that I think there's more room for the government to come in. Wherever I agree with Doc that we have to bring the private sector on and try to get them as to be part of the story. But I don't think we could wait on that too long. Again, I think our situation, as he himself said, is getting from bad to worse every single day. And I think there's more room for our governments to intervene and begin to have legislation. You know, if you look at Finland is the country people always point, but Finland, if you look at Finland, has been doing this since the 1970s. You know, they have been carefully looking at all the products that are in their country, and they are passing laws to ensure that those products, none of those products, are products that would continue to be harming people. You know, for the life of me, I could never understand why we have seen Finland doing that. We see what the impact on their health situation has been, and fewer of us, or I wouldn't say none of us, very few of us are really following what they are doing. But the government, to me, has to step in and say enough is enough. I really believe we are in a crisis situation with this NCDs, and that should be a wake-up call for all our government. We have to step in and start doing something about our food, about the quality of the food that is being offered to our people. And Doc, I think, was making the point, or Prof. Simon, that we have to do things to ensure that what we call in healthy food is not the most expensive food, man. That doesn't make sense. You cannot say you're fighting NCDs and yet the things that we call in healthy food tends to think. We have to make our economic system has to be configured in a way that the food that is healthy is available to everybody at a reasonable cost. We have to. It's not impossible, but we have to make up our minds that is what we really want to do.
And
Thank you, Prof.
so Tony, I completely agree with what Prof just said. And I really want to hammer this nail in even stronger. The commercial determinants of health, which we have already said there may be a conflict, there is a conflict of interest, and private sector may have some bias for profits over people. This can only be counteracted by the political determinants. We need strong political systems. We need legislation. So what is the role of jurisprudence in creating new systems that legislate? We've just come out of a pandemic and we saw various emergency orders in place. We saw various, you could not be on the road by a certain time. You had to wear a mask. All these things were in place because we understood the seriousness and the serious threat to health. I do not get that feeling that is where we're at with NCDs, but that is where it must be. We cannot allow the commercial determinants the kind of side stream and delays, almost like you're on a railway track and you're trying to move forward and people are there holding you back and say, well, let's wait a little longer. We cannot wait. We cannot afford to wait. And the same profits that industry may be trying to kind of grab at are the same results in the future that is going to work out to their detriment. They will not have the labor force. And at that point, if they then decide, well, we can no longer do this, we want to, it will be too late. Let me just say, however, it is not as simple as industry doing good or bad or kind of in your face saying, we will not reduce our sugar in our, you can do simple things. If you are a unhealthy industry, food and beverage industry, you don't want to reformulate your product. So what do? You go and you sponsor a healthy event, like an inter-school sports or some other healthy activity. You can't be unhealthy if you're associated with a healthy event. So these strategies are used by industry to kind of justify unhealthy products. Or for instance, you donate things that might be related to health. I don't know, like a calorie counter, for instance, because you can't be unhealthy and be encouraging people to count calories. So you try to change the narrative such that the script, which is well written and followed, conceals the true the true thrust of where you're trying to get at, and that is to deceive society into thinking that you're really healthier than you're really not. So the solution there, private sector needs to be engaged more, yes, in the reformulations and all those other things, but they need to also support. The same profits need to go towards health. They need to go towards civil society organizations. If you really want to help us, don't provide a calorie counter. Provide support for civil society organization in your country.
I'm going to go to our intervener, but quickly before I do so, one person who seemed to have gotten that whole balancing their political experience with obesity and childhood obesity and commercial interest is Michelle Obama, who just launched a range of low calorie healthy drinks for the masses to help them and help us all have a healthy lifestyle. She's not a sponsor or advertiser. I just thought that it was an interesting fact. Allow me now to go to our intervener.
I wonder,
Nunu-
Tony, this is directly related to what you're saying. I wonder if Professor Anderson wants to mention anything about low calorie products, especially as director of
Well,
CDRC.
Tony, do I have your permission to
you're
raise
going
the
to
flag
get
for
me in
UE?
trouble, but very quickly, very quickly.
Very quickly. I mean, 10 years ago, we did something called the Barbados Diabetes Reversal Study, where we showed that encouraging persons to have low calories over a period of time, say 8 to 12 weeks, reduced their propensity to be diabetogenic or made them become less diabetogenic than they were before. They had to throw away their medicines, they had to throw away their hypertension drugs, and actually they lost weight and felt better. That was a sustainable thing. This goes to the UK. Big international study takes place, finding the same thing that we found here. We've repeated it during COVID, but the logistics of getting these international drinks in meant that we had to think on our feet and make our own formulation from the foods that we enjoy and eat, which are healthy. And they give us a low calorie. We found the same findings, and we're hoping to have these formulations available for people to use to reverse or to reduce the burden of NCDs across the lifespan. Thanks.
So chat, you will raise Michelle Obama next 2 years. Allow me to introduce Unica Marshall from the University of the West Indies student, and she has a question for our panelists.
Good night. No, it is absolutely no secret that non-communicable diseases present major health risks and also negatively affect economies. Now, do you think that a regional effort will be more impactful than a single nation effort in terms of health policies to reduce the economic effects and the strains on the healthcare systems?
Who do you want to take that question? I can jump in.
You're on.
So you are attending. That's a brilliant question, but you are also attending a top class university at UWI. So let me just start by saying it has to be a regional effort. Let us look at the pandemic response. Was that an individual island effort? It would never have worked, right? It has to be a regional effort. Our region has to sit down as a region and decide, listen, we are under threat from the same threat. The same way we have to pool resources to fight COVID-19, the pandemic, and now to address the issue of alarming crime in various Caribbean territories, including my colleagues in Jamaica and Trinidad. So it has to be a regional approach. It almost does not make sense if it isn't. Caribbean leaders must now sit together and decide, listen, this is a problem. We have tried soft approaches. We now need to legislate certain things because our entire region is at risk. A previous prime minister of this country, the late David Thompson, made a comment, and this has always stuck with me. The NCDs, if they are left unchecked, they have the potential in this country to reverse all of the gains made in a post-independent Barbados. And to think about that is startling. So it has to be a CARICOM response. And our CARICOM meetings, every time there's a CARICOM meeting, there is an NCD agenda on the meeting, I'm certain. But we need to get that momentum going because industry and the commercial determinants, they're very clever and they have their momentum going as well. We have to be on top of the game. And the game to me here, as a natural progression, seems to be how do we get legislation in place to prevent certain basic things, marketing of unhealthy foods to children, the sale of various things in supermarkets, front of package warning labels so that people actually know the junk that they're eating and it's not camouflaged in a packet. As a Caribbean society, our governments and our leaders need to be serious in legislating things.
Thank you so much, Dr. Connell. All of the panelists. 65% of the respondents in the survey, and please do not shoot the messenger, disagreed strongly or just disagreed with the fact that they felt as if their government and the healthcare institutions in their country have not been doing enough to address NCDs. Right? Given that, in your opinion, what does the post-pandemic, you said we just came out, WHO said last week, COVID is officially over. What does the post-pandemic healthcare system look like? And what is your 10-year vision for that system? I will start with Dr. Anderson and then end with Dr. Connell. Sorry, Professor Anderson, and then end with Dr. Connell.
Yeah, so I mean, we had a striking event with COVID, and as Dr. Connell had mentioned before, nations across the region, including the Caribbean, including Barbados, actually took significant steps to try and deal with the matter in hand. There were some really interesting things that I heard where you had delivery of medications to patients. We had some telemedicine gains and so on. So during the pandemic, we were able to mobilize and to change the trajectory of the condition by taking particular steps to move forward. Post-pandemic, it seems as if, and this is something that Kenneth said recently, and it may have been Prof. It seems as if we've gone back into the old days of doing very little. We can't afford that. We need to make sure that post-pandemic, if there's required funding that needs to be given to deal with a certain matter, we need to do it. We need to talk across the stakeholders so that it's a whole of community approach to dealing with the problem. So it's not just the university researchers thinking that they want to do some ivory tower stuff, but we really need to sit down with policymakers and stakeholders to say, what are the problems, what are the priorities, and how do we encourage our society to change their mindset. There are things that are required in terms of the culture of the region. We are a music-loving region, but we don't move that much. It doesn't make any sense. How can you be listening to music and not moving? We need to change either the tune going forward so that we can start moving. We need to have a more physically able society. And we're not talking about, I'm not using the words gym or fitness regimes or whatever. I'm talking about moving. Just do something in your day. Go outside and plant some roses or some callaloo or some plant a banana tree or something like that. Dig up the soil and put something in. That is going to generate energy. That's going to help you to feel better and move better and so on. So those are some of the things. Of course, we can't afford to lose sight of the technological advances that have taken place, particularly around the work with telemedicine, etc. We have to move that along so that we can get more people getting access to care. Not everybody can give up a day from work their blood pressure in clinic. Some people if they miss a day of work, they might miss the job. They might lose the job. We need to they need to have more subtle ways of encouraging people to measure their blood pressure, to measure their sugar levels, to eat properly. To how we think what we eat. We talked about food security earlier. Planting backyard gardens or community gardens. Why do we have to wait for everything to be imported in? Those are some of the things that we can do across the board to change our trajectory towards this NCD dirt that is just going to societies economically.
Dr. Connell.
The one thing that has disappointed me in this entire pandemic or post-pandemic period is that we possibly have gone back to doing things the same way we did them before. And we knew that our health system, this isn't just in the Caribbean, we knew our health systems had inherent flaws. They were not as agile, they were vulnerable, they were not as resilient. Therefore, it made no sense for us to go back to the way we were doing things before. But for, again, behavioral change is not just you and I kind of having some more exercise. It's about how do you change national policy. I think the recipe or the solution here has to do with innovation. There are some innovations that came out of COVID that we have forgotten. For instance, how do we secure as a region cheap and effective drugs to treat NCDs? You know, we are literally at the mercy of pharmaceutical companies with exorbitant fees. How do we secure, because there are people out there who need to be treated? How do we increase our food security so that we have healthy food available at cheaper prices? How do we use taxation, for instance, to even reduce some of the prices on some of the healthy foods that we have? And I guess from wearing the Healthy Caribbean Coalition hat, how do we really incorporate a new role for civil society organizations? We have really kind of hammered down the political determinants, but this cannot be only a governmental response. Civil society organizations may have to find a new role in the Caribbean space, in the post-COVID space, such that we create conversations around conflicts of interest, around commercial determinants, around continue our advocacy, the use of technology, including in communications with other international bodies. All these innovations need to kind of take place, but they can only be led and the conversation can only be held at the table of Caribbean leaders. And this is where political determinants play an important role in getting us to address the NCD burden.
Professor Theodore?
Tony, you really then ask me about the post pandemic thing, but I think I have to say.
No, I want the last.
No, if you want to build on what Simon and Kenneth are saying, I think if we ask for this post pandemic system, if I ask myself what must the health system itself, how must the health system itself be sort of reconfigured to be a system that is more resilient and better better prepared, and a system that will generally see us with the NCDs less being a problem than it is. And I think there are two things that we are seeing. The first thing is that you see 1978, the Alma Ata thing. Alma Ata was probably one of the best documents that maybe has been produced. Well, it was abundantly clear that if we are to have a system where everybody gets the proper health care, there are two things you have to definitely make sure that your focus, your investments have to be biased to primary care and to public health. You see, those are the two things. This sort of prevention that Doc is saying that we absolutely need. If we have to do that, prevention has to be invested in. We have to make sure that enough investment. Now, we are not saying that we know that hospitals are a good thing and we need our hospitals, but we also have to admit that hospitals will not help us with our NCD problem, and therefore we have to make sure that our investments are more biased towards primary care and public health to ensure that the programs that Doc is talking about and the mission that Prof was talking about, that we have the investment that would sustain these things over an extended period, and our investment approach in health has to change. We have to see public health and primary care as our main as our big investment areas now. That's the first thing we have to do. But the next thing we have to do, is to ensure that everybody in our system has access to care when they need that kind of a care. Now, we still live in a region, I am sorry to say, I know people don't like to hear me say it, but we still live in a region where I think it is true to say that if you have money, if you don't have any problems for money, chances are you will not have any problems for really health. When anything's wrong with you, you'll get it done. But you see, we have to decide as a region that we want to start living in a system where every single person in our region, when they have a health problem, the thing that they don't have to worry about at that time is whether they have enough money to pay for care. So that means we have to have a health financing system which would enable everybody in our, or every resident, every citizen to have the care they need when they need it. Such systems are available. Some countries are trying with those systems. We have 1 or 2 countries even in the region that are trying with this system, but most of our countries have been resisting it for the last 5 years. We have been promoting it, but they have been resisting. You have to have some kind of social insurance system where you have it's the government putting into the pool, employers putting in the pool, and people who are working in putting in. And what our evidence has shown quite categorically is that if you create such a pool, there will be enough funds to give everybody good care. And you know something? The cost of that pool is less than what we are paying now. When you add public spending to private spending now, the cost of the pool we are talking about, which will give care to everybody, good care to everybody, is less. Now, why they are resisting it, I cannot for the life of me know. But that is one of the changes I think we have to go for. We have to create a system where every single person who needs care when they need it will get it without studying whether they have enough money.
Excellent contribution. We have to take a break. We'll be right back afterwards. I do know that you've said stuff that has definitely opened up more questions after the break. Do not touch those remote controls. We'll be right back.
Jamaica and its workforce are advancing quickly. Life-changing opportunities are arising. You need training and support. We are the Renewed Heart NSTA Trust, committed to providing new and emerging skills training and opportunities. Come to Heart. We'll help you claim your place in the workforce of the future.
Child, you're too young for a gamble. And me, you want to get in a trouble? Go on home.
Underage gambling is illegal. If caught enabling a minor to engage in gambling activities, you can be fined up to $1 million or 3 months in prison. Call Crime Stop now to report illegal gambling. You don't have to give your name. A message from the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission.
Mommy?
Yes, Zoe?
Can we read this book? It will only take 10 minutes.
Sure, sit down. Every spring, Madame Angel Wing arranges a...
Do you have 10 minutes? Read with your child today. Reading with your children for just 10 minutes each day helps develop their language and listening skills, stimulates their imagination, and expands their understanding of the world. So, start reading with your child today.
Size matters. Evidence shows that bigger is better when it comes to graphic health warnings on tobacco product packages. The effectiveness of health warnings increases with their size. The proposed Tobacco Control Act requires that graphic health warnings cover at least 80% of the principal display areas of the tobacco products. By implementing larger warnings, Jamaica will join a growing number of countries that have adopted such laws. The right of governments to require large graphic warnings has also been upheld in many cases, as various tribunals at the highest levels have found that the size did not interfere with the company's ability to use their trademarks. Larger graphic health warnings under the proposed act will reduce appeal, consumption, addiction, and protect the nation's youth.
Whenever you hear the following tone, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, will be giving information on an emergency situation affecting the island. Please be on the alert and listen to your radio and television for further information. This was a test of the emergency alert system, brought to you by ODPEM.
You know who have the gun them. Stop going like you don't notice. You notice.
Welcome back to this edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum, brought to you by the Central Bank of Barbados. My panelists, Dr. Connell, Professor Theodore, Professor Anderson. At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our social media moderator, Dr. Anke Scott Joseph, to give us a synopsis of what people are seeing online.
Good evening, Tony. Two conclusions are drawn from this end. One, return on policy decisions must be noticeable. For instance, revenues earned from imposing taxes to curb the consumption of unhealthy foods must be used to cut the prices of those foods that are considered healthy. And second, and most importantly, measures to alter consumption patterns should be holistic, not semi-defensive. For example, curbing high sugar intake food by promoting dairy products in the school feeding program should be revisited. One of the most consumed sweet and fat-containing foods is milk. Milk is featured in the school feeding programs of about 14 CARICOM member states. Is dairy a dietary necessity? Dairy is considered insignificant in the blue zones. The blue zones are 6 areas where people generally live beyond the age of 100. For example, Ikaria in Greece, Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, a Seventh-day Adventist community in California, among others. But a plant-based diet, low stress levels, regular physical activities, a strong sense of community, and a purpose in life primarily accounts for about 80% of longevity in these countries. So question to Professor Anderson, can we bump up the life expectancy age to about 10 to 15 years if we adjust the environment for the most vulnerable, that is our children, by putting into action models that replicate the healthy lifestyle practices in the Blue Zone? Can we do this in our curriculum, school fooding programs, our curriculum, and co-curricular activities, given that early experiences are built to shape development in the early part of our childhood? Good night, Tony.
Thank you, Anke.
Very good
Professor
question.
Yes, thank you for that question. I mean, I think probably we need to go back 100 years to just answer this question. 100 years ago in the Caribbean, mortality rates from childhood mortality rates were something like over 200 per thousand, going up to 25% of live births at one point. This was a significant problem that required actually the creation of the University of the West Indies to solve through an institute called the Tropical Metabolism Research Institute, where they were able to find very unique ways to manage childhood malnutrition. It wasn't just giving the child any food to eat. It was giving the child the right balance, appropriate food so that they could thrive and grow. And the implications of that is that by the 1970s, childhood mortality rate had fallen below 5% of the Caribbean. Why do I mention all of that? What I'm trying to say is that there was a time when things were tough in the region, and the region took steps through the creation of the universities, through the creation of proper hospital medical care and systems to deal with an issue that was significant. So let us go to the question: can we increase lifespan? One of the biggest blue zones that was mentioned is the one in Loma Linda, California. That's in the middle of obesogenic, very tough environment for people to survive in terms of having been nutritionally secure. But those communities of faith, you mentioned the Seventh-day Adventists, people from those communities are able to sustain, regardless of what's happening around them, a quality of life and a lifespan advantage over their neighboring communities. And that's because of the practice of knowing what you eat and eating just enough to maintain an ideal body weight. So we can go to the other communities that might be in Japan, etc., where there's been a long tradition and it's more difficult to sort of tease out the key things. We in the region, we had a reasonable diet in the 1960s, 70s with, if you look at the photos going back over the years, you didn't see an obesogenic society, which we see now, right? So we can change the pattern, but we need to change our mindset. We need to understand that the practicalities of eating just anything isn't going to suit us, and that we can't afford it. We can't store up enough savings, as Prof will tell you, Prof Theodore will say, to pay for our health in our aging and waning years, because the costs are going to spiral out of our way. And the only way that we're going to, well, one or two ways that we're going to change the trajectory is adjusting what we eat, how often we eat, and then what quality. And by moving a little bit more. And we don't have to overdo it and become Ironman athletes to be able to do that. We can just very simply make changes to our approach to what we eat in a reasonable way over a period of time to get the benefits that you want. Some people might try various activities like intermittent fasting, etc. All of these may have their place or they may not. But if you do a structured, simple, let's speak of the Mediterranean diet for some situations, or caveman diet. A simple unprocessed foods. Avoid the ultra processing foods. You don't need them in your diet. You can have a carrot instead of a piece of chips. You can have something else. You can still eat what you like, but don't load the plate so that it is 10 pounds in weight. Have a half a pound plate of food. Those are the things that we need to do over the lifespan to deal with the matters. And so let me hand back to you, Tony.
A further consideration, and we would have had this conversation previously. I personally follow that whole processed food, no dairy kind of diet. But if we are small island developing states being affected by climate change, there are further considerations. Like, for example, with dairy, it takes 1,000 liters of water to make 1 liter of milk. Why are we encouraging people to use dairy? Things like why are we encouraging people to eat so much beef, given the consideration in terms of what cows put in the atmosphere? So that's another layer that our people are going to have to consider when it comes to our lifestyle and our diets. And I just find it really interesting in terms of how we are going to really educate persons to change their lifestyle, to change how they eat, not only from a disability and a deaf perspective, but then you have to layer it with the climate change perspective as well. Just a point,
I think,
for consideration.
It's a
very important point.
It's an important consideration. Yes. Very important. I mean, climate change affects health in such significant ways. It's not just the food that we're going to be able to not eat because it won't grow anymore because it's too hot, or we don't have enough water to do irrigation, or those things. It's really some of the health effects of climate change, the dust particles, the pollution that we inhale that affects the various particulate matters that affects our health, and also the heat problems. With you have hypertension, you need to then cool the house to keep you alive, because you're going to end up being dehydrated and end up in the hospital with problems. All of these things are problems that we're going to have to deal with, because even though we're not the most polluting countries in the world, we are going to be affected by what is happening elsewhere, and we have to be prepared across all the levels to deal with the matters in hand.
Tony, I just want to focus us on something which I think is critical. because there is definitely an elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is that the problem of health, the solutions to that problem lie out or rest largely outside of the health landscape. And this is where, as more older people would say, this is where health needs to get down off of our high horses and say, listen, this may be a health problem, but we certainly cannot only look at health for the solution. You have to have a multi-sectoral, all of society response, all of government response. And so if we are going to even make any headway in terms of a solution, we have to consider the cost, the economic side of things. We have to bring in education, climate change, industry, religion, and culture. All of these factors must sit at the same table. But what is the problem when you have all these experts sitting at the same table? We all don't speak the same language. Health is talking about mortality rates, and Prof is talking about excess mortality rate, and someone else may be talking about GDP, and we don't understand each other. So the first thing that must happen is that we all need to be in the same space with the same goal, and we all need to kind of translate what we're saying in a very simple and palatable way so that each other can understand each other's role in this whole problem. We saw this perfectly done during the last pandemic, and then we perfectly forgot about it. We had health had to speak to defense. Defense had to speak with tourism. Tourism had to speak with agriculture. All these systems came together and all these sectors came together because we recognized that the problem was way outside of just a virus. We had a society that had to continue living. The only way, and this is where NCD commissions play a significant role. NCD commissions allow a table to be formed where all these sectors can come to lay their interests and biases at the table, to come up with solutions that involve not just their own particular sector, but with the common goal of improving health and fighting NCDs. Until we do that, we will just be shouting in various silos and we will not come up with a solution.
Yeah.
Could
I just make
for you? Go ahead.
Let's make a quick point on the doctor. What Doc says there is really central, and I'm saying this. One of the good things about this session is that it is the central bank that has put it on. No, that is good, because let me tell you why. The NCD problem to deal with it is not just the Ministry of Health. We have to, the Ministry of Finance has to be on board, the Ministry of Planning has to be on board, the Ministry of Agriculture has to be on board, and that we have to find out to bring them on board. All of them have to see the NCDs as a problem that all of them have to be looking at. It's not just not just health. I think it is a whole range of these key ministries where the decisions about what we invest in, how much we invest, and so on. Those decisions we have to sit together at the table and decide on that, because the NCD problem, it is not simply a health problem. It is a problem that is destroying the economies of the region, and all of these other ministries have to simply get on board.
You spoke about investing. I'm going to speak about the fact that NCDs cause 16,000 deaths per year before the age of 70. I want to talk to you about pension funds and growth capacity for the region. If we have persons dying before a certain age, it's going to affect our economic productivity, is going to affect pension funds. What are your thoughts on this, Professor Theodore?
You see, I mean, when you think of pension funds, there are two sides you look at. There have to be contributions to that fund, and then there's an expenditure. The fund has to do out some money. The thing about the NCDs, the NCDs, they are depressing the pension funds on the contribution side because of the mortality and morbidity problems that they bring, and they are causing on the expenditure side to increase, because in fact more people now have to retire early. And of course, people with NCDs would tend to, some of them live for a fairly long time. And it means is that the expenditures on the expenditures are high. So that the NCDs are bad news for pension. That's the simple story. The revenues that the pension funds need are being depressed, and the expenditure side is being pushed up. And that I think it's something that which is why I'm saying that the point I made just now, that we have to seeing the NCDs as a health problem. They are a major health problem, yes, but they are essentially a social problem. They are an economic problem, and pensions are just simply one of the bad examples of one of the examples of how bad the NCDs are really doing with us. I think if we don't, we already facing, each of our social security organizations in the region is facing a serious problem with the pension funds over the next 20 to 30 years, and I'm telling you, that 20 year to the is going to be shortened if the NCD problem isn't. They are going to reach the problems of having enough funds to pay the pension. That problem is going to be on the table within the next 15 years if we don't bring these NCDs under control. It's as simple.
It's no coincidence that I'm not going to call the country's name, but the country, particularly in Europe, that has the strongest pension fund, known across the world for how strong it is also in the blue zone area. So there must be some kind of correlation between eating healthily.
They're definitely connected. Definitely connected.
So those are things that we need to really educate persons on, and that's why we're happy to have the Caribbean Economic Forum. Now, a point was made earlier. And I want to ask this question because you hear it all the time. Oh, it's very expensive to eat healthy. Is eating healthy expensive?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which Caribbean country is going to take that one, but certainly the one that I live in, yes. So eating healthy is expensive, and I don't think we can fool ourselves with that. So Tony, I use the example of a travel to another country, and the reason why I was transitioned into eating healthier, moving more, and cycling was because all these things were in place in the environment. Okay, I was able to access fruits and vegetables easily at affordable costs. I was able to feel the guilt of purchasing a sugar-sweetened beverage because everyone else around me was drinking water. I also felt guilty taking a cab when everyone was cycling in cycling lanes. The environment caused me to change my health-seeking behavior. And the only way that we are going to do this in our space is if we make it very difficult to purchase unhealthy foods, and I've had to change my route home on evenings to avoid certain drive-throughs, and make it very easy to purchase and survive on healthier foods. It is as simple as that. However, we use our taxation to deter unhealthy behavior, we somehow need to make it also encourage healthier behavior with incentives. Or not, people will just see it as punitive. And I use the example intentionally. I don't mind, or maybe I do mind, but I don't mind paying more taxes on fluid, on gasoline and diesel. If I know that my roads are going to be repaired, I don't mind paying money on other things. If I know that my sewage and my life is going to be safer because the money is going to be used in various social security situations. So I don't mind paying the additional taxes if I know that money is going to be used to change my health environment. And this is something I think Caribbean citizens have to push for. How are the political determinants influencing how money collected using the banner of health? How is that being used to address the problem of health.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I
Yeah.
must say, I know what country that is that you were speaking about, Dr. Connell, because it's only when I traveled and lived in that country that I realized that what is a good old Caribbean plate is actually 3 meals on one plate. So
At
I
least.
definitely,
Yes.
it's very, very
10-pound plate.
yeah,
I think
three plates
I
on.
think
Definitely.
no,
I'm going to
but,
have to ask you for your final
yeah.
thoughts because we've come to the end of our session. I could have done it all night. But please, I'd like to get your final thoughts on NCDs and any final thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers. Starting with
So go ahead, Prof.
No, no. If I well, I was gonna say I was my final thought was building on what Doc is saying. You see, the creating a better environment for people. I think that is what we have to start thinking about and investing in. You know, even a simple thing like more accessible what they call it sidewalks for people either the side of the road, you know, that kind of, so that people could take their exercise and walk even very easy simple things like that. We have to become a nation that starts seeing, doing the things that are around us, things that we do every day, but create change the nature of the space that is around. I think we have to invest in that a little bit more. I think, and I think some of the monies we are getting from these from taxing these products that are not healthy should definitely be used to do things like that, creating a more an environment that is more conducive to really preventing us falling into this problem of the non-communicable diseases. It is changing, but we have to invest more in that, I think.
1 minute each. Final thoughts, Professor Anderson?
Okay, well, yes. I mean, I'm reminded of the parable of the Good Samaritan, and the reason why that parable comes to mind is because I'm thinking about the next generation. I'm thinking about our children. Are we going to be walking by as adults and as the current holders of society? Are we going to walk by our children and leave them to suffer? Or are we going to stop and help? And the ways to stop and help is to actually make a change ourselves and to prepare the next society for a better foundation. It's not an impossible task. It's something that can be done. And, you know, we speak, Prof mentions things about walkability, you know, and all those things. Having a system within our schools where children are learning about farming, putting canopies and trees around our environments so we can cool things down.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about the environment and its problems that's gonna take some step towards changing that. You know, moving a little bit more than we have done, and let them see us moving, not just listening to the music, but moving with the music, and that is gonna lead us towards a better life. Thank you.
30 seconds, Dr. Connell.
Health is a human right. Caribbean citizens are entitled to that right just as any other citizen in our world space. We need to hold our governments and elected officials to task to make sure that we can attain that right in the healthiest possible environment.
There you have it. And this has been the latest edition of the Caribbean Economic Forum, brought to you by the Central Bank of Barbados. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to our producers. Have a wonderful night. God bless you. My name is Tony Thorne. God be with you.
You know who have the gun them. Stop go like you don't notice. You notice.
Legendary performances were the theme of the night for Reggae Sunfest 1995. Local and international award-winning artists graced the stage with songs that were a hit then and now. PBCJ now brings you highlights of Reggae Sunfest 1995. This is In Times Past.